Start the panel discussion, coordinating cyber community-wide. It's a team sport. I'm Deke Copenhaver. I'll be your moderator today. I served as 9 years for mayor of Augusta, Georgia, currently serve as principal of Copenhaver Consulting. And during my time in office, it was a constant focus on collaboration and bringing the community together. So I'm very excited to have this distinguished panel today. I believe they are a panel of rock stars. So I would like to go ahead and introduce them to you, and then I'll let each gentleman tell you a little bit about what he does, how it pertains to cyber, and why they're here today. First off, we have to my far left, Tom Patterson, Vice President, Unisys Global Security Solutions. Next to him, we have Mark Baggett, President, Greater Augusta Information Systems Security Association. On this side, we have Todd Boudreau, Deputy Commandant, U.S. Army Cyber School. And next to him, we have Tom Sadowski, President, CEO, Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore. So, Tom, let's start with you.
Well, thanks very much. So I've been in this economic development biz just over 20 years. I've been in current post, the Economic Alliance, for about 10. Our organization, by construct, is a public-private partnership. It's government, industry, and higher education all collaborating with a very simple mission, which is to promote the Baltimore region as a world-class market in which to live, work, learn, and invest. I will tell you that in execution of that mission, it is key that we have the major stakeholders, industry, government, education, all kind of collaborating as equal partners. It's made that joint lift very easy. You're able to resource a lot of folks in making that business case and ultimately the sale and convincing companies to stay and grow. Prior to my time with the Economic Alliance, I was the Economic Development Director in Harford County, working on behalf of Aberdeen Proving Ground during the 05 BRAC process. I was with that community for about 7 years and left right after BRAC was signed into law to support Fort Meade in its growth, with the exception of ISSA and several other missions, which ultimately led to it being designated as the new home for the U.S. Cyber Command. I can't tell you how pleased I am to have been invited to participate today in this discussion. Augusta's beautiful, and I will find ample reason to come back and visit to help if I can, or just to visit with my wife and family. But you seem to have done a number of just tremendous things in preparing for the tremendous opportunity that awaits you. And I will tell you, finally, it does pay to hang out at the hotel bar until a little late, because bumping into Lieutenant General Cardone last night and having the opportunity to speak with him was pretty special. I will tell you that I was one of those folks that said how far along you are, and reminded me of the experience at Meade. But after everything I've heard in my brief stay, I think you're a lot further along than we are in anticipating the challenges and planning for them. So thanks again for the opportunity. Didn't mean to take so much time.
Thank you, Tom. Todd?
So good afternoon. First, I'm honored to join such an esteemed panel and privileged to address such an august group that's here. So my name is Todd Boudreau. I'm the Deputy Commandant for the U.S. Army Cyber School. 14 months ago, that school did not exist. There was a general order signed that established the cyber branch about a year ago. It directed that the Signal Center of Excellence be transformed into the Cyber Center of Excellence. Just a little note on that. You know, the Army's big on acronyms, and so if I say any and you don't know what they are, either write them down or get with me later. But so in the Signal Center of Excellence, not only do we do acronyms, but we then we say them. We don't just call out letters. So it wasn't SIGCOE. It was SIGCO. And determining the Cyber Center of Excellence, a lot of times you'll see cyber with a CY, and so it was CYCOE was thought for a while. I'll let you spell that out and sound it out in your mind. We chose not to go there. We went with the CCOE instead. Some of you got it. Some of you didn't get it. Ask the folks that didn't. And then the declaration to move Army Cyber Command to Fort Gordon. So the Army's decision to locate the institutional side of the Army, which is the part that is required to train, to man, and to equip the force, and then the operational force, that's where they go to operate on Fort Gordon, is significant. It's significant in our area. It's significant in the Army. And I think it's going to be significant in DOD as well. So Fort Gordon in 2015 is not Fort Gordon in 2005. I first came here in 1983, later came back in 2007. But in 2005, 2007, Fort Gordon was mostly a training post. and mostly train signal soldiers, of which I spent about 31 years being one of. By 2015, less than 30% of Fort Gordon is actually training signal soldiers or training at all. Over 40% is military intelligence and cyberspace operations that are 24/7. It'll continue to transform those numbers and shape with the continued growth. We've made it about halfway from 2012 to 2015. We saw over 2,000 new positions on Fort Gordon. That doesn't count spouses and what the families generate in additional businesses and opportunities that would bring other people into the community. And then from 2016 to 2019, we anticipated about another 2,000. So what does Fort Gordon have, and what were some of those reasons for doing that? Well, we've got a lot of real estate, about over 55,000 acres, inexpensive power. This is a great place to be and to have a business because of Georgia Power and the partnerships that we have with them. Robust water infrastructure, which you don't think of maybe until you look at some really big data centers in the way that we need to cool them and some other things for operations. But more on point for this group that's here today, the local community, and these numbers may be a little aged, and so some things may be a little better than when I had copied them down, but it was the second fastest growing IT region in the nation, and so that's significant. And that's not even counting what we're on the precipice of being able to see. The fourth most affordable place to live. Multiple air and sea ports within 5 hours, a diverse recreation and entertainment venues, and low threat, relatively low threat from natural disasters, unless you think of Ice-Mageddon that happened just a few years ago. So we're postured really good on Fort Gordon, and we bring a lot of things, and there's a lot of it around, but what do we need? And that gets to really what the panel will be discussing and talking about. We really need an ecosystem that draws highly skilled workforce, and more importantly, then promotes the local creation of skilled talent. A lot of business decisions are being made today on whether or not to move companies to this area, and some of those decisions is whether or not the workforce will come with it, and even if they do, how will they eventually replace that workforce? And so is this an atmosphere of which that will grow? And the good news is seeing the community come together, such as the Alliance for Cybersecurity Education, which is a consortium of education and community partners that came together to work on 6th to 12th grade curriculum, and as well as looking at post-secondary operations of that. My youngest son is 28 years old, and most of their schooling in the high school and even middle school was done overseas. And so we had one opportunity, one option. We went to the DoD schools. Not so here, and so I understand that counties normally have some competition between the different counties and how they're going to draw. And what I saw within the ACE as they came together is I didn't see any of that. I saw one team that came together that recognized that this is a bigger problem. There's enough to go around, and so how are we going to solve this together? And the old, a rising tide lifts all ships. And so a lot of great work being done there. And so let me just kind of conclude beginning remarks or some thoughts with what I saw on a recent trip to Israel and some of the parallels. So I had gone to Israel a couple of times for different reasons. I went recently with the Georgia Department of Economic Development and the mayor of Atlanta. While there, we went to Tel Aviv, and if you look into Israel and Google it, you'll find out that they call themselves a startup nation. Not necessarily because they're a new nation, but because they have a lot of startup companies. General Cardone had talked about if you can pull in and tether venture capitalists, that really will feed the innovation in what you need. And there are a lot of venture capitalists that are investing in Israel. In fact, it's more honorable to start a company and fail than to have never started a company in Israel. So during that trip, we went down to the area of Beersheba. Beersheba is down in the Negev. That's the desert. About 60% of the land mass is in the Negev, but only about 10% of the population. And so for many years, in fact, we were cited by the mayor of Beersheba. For the last 17 years, prime ministers have come, cut ribbons, dropped cornerstones, done a lot of publicity to try to get the folks to move down there, and it hadn't happened until just recently. And so what had changed? Well, a couple of things. Not only did the PM continue that effort, but Ben Gurion University decided that it was going to take cybersecurity education serious and created a world-class educational system. The Israeli Defense Force made the decision to move its signal and its cyber units out of Tel Aviv down into Ben Gurion, into the Beersheba area. And then there was this cooperation of companies such as IBM, EMC Square, RSA, Verint, Elbit Systems, Deutsche Telekom, and they came together, and instead of looking at how we normally look at things in a competitive nature, decided how can we come together in a cooperative nature. This is a big enough puzzle. There is plenty for everybody here, and so let's look at diving into those areas that make you an expert, and let's let you focus there, and we'll overlap and make sure that we create bigger capabilities. And then that same kind of methodology came from Tel Aviv and Beersheba as well. And so if you look at Tel Aviv and Beersheba, if you look at Atlanta and Augusta, if you look at Richmond County and Columbia County and some of these parallels, what an opportunity we have. The U.S. Army has made a decision that all of its signal and cyber training and all of its cyberspace operations will be done here on Fort Gordon. Sounds very reminiscent. There's a lot of academic efforts to raise the level of education in the high schools and the post-secondary school, and it's happening in a cooperative, not in a competitive environment. And so it really then, what's left out of that equation was the draw for industry for them to come. And I'll tell you that Beersheba and Israel itself were able to do some economic things with companies that drew them, and they knew that they could get a foothold because there was a workforce. And another amazing thing is that a lot of those companies said that they did not bring workers with them, but they took what probably other people would look at and say that's a bunch of desert people out in the Negev, and they took them in and they invested in them and trained them, and they raised the entire human capital of that area from that area. And so there was ownership, and there was pride, and there was things that you don't necessarily get when an outsider comes in. And so what an opportunity we have here with those same type of the framework that exists and the same type of opportunities. And I'll kind of conclude with a quote that I've used already before from Leonard Ravenhill, who said that an opportunity of a lifetime must be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. There's a lot of momentum that DOD and the Army is presenting, and you can only take advantage and draft that momentum if you move when it's moving. And so I'm looking forward to continued integration and interaction. I'm looking forward to continued discussion.
Thank you, Todd. And as we move forward, we really view this as a conversation with the audience. So you have index cards. If you have any questions, please write them on the index card. Somebody will come around and take them up. And I will, after we conclude the opening remarks, I'll have a couple of questions, and then we'll just move on into the question and answer session. Mark, please.
My name is Mark Baggett. My background is consultant as a penetration tester, incident response. I was Chief Information Security Officer for Morris Communications here in Augusta for many years. And then in 2011, SANS gave me the opportunity to go out to Fort Gordon and serve those that are serving our country and work with them in establishing and building cyber warrior programs out there. So I jumped on that opportunity. I was asked to come here today as the president of the Greater Augusta ISSA, which is the Information Systems Security Association. It's a local chapter of security professionals, and as Todd mentioned, us security guys and gals, we're kind of a different breed, and we kind of need. Is that good? All right. We kind of need that environment, that ecosystem that we can come together and work on unique problems and solve things and have challenges that we can work on together as a community. And maybe 10 years ago now, I didn't see that anywhere in Augusta. So I contacted an ISSA chapter, start went up. They said we had to find 12 security professionals. And I thought to myself, where in Augusta, Georgia, am I going to find 12 security professionals? And it was a bit of a struggle, actually, at first, 10 years ago, to come up with 12 security people so we could start this chapter. But we did, and shortly after that, Augusta University, or Augusta College at the time, was more than happy to support our organization, provide us with facilities to bring together people and opportunities to speak. We had our first public meetings when we grew very quickly from meetings of 5 to 10 people to 150 people at one of the meetings we had within our first year of our organization, which I know some of you from Atlanta and other large cities that have organizations, 150 people showing up at security meetings is really outstanding for any city, much less Augusta, Georgia. We also found out that Augusta, Georgia has a lot of security talent. So, and one of the stats I love to mention is SANS GSE, which is, SANS has multiple certifications. The highest level of certification you can have is the SANS GSE, which requires you to have like 5 other certs and complete labs and things like that. And there's 130 of them in the world, even though the certification has been around for 15 years now. And of those 137 of them live here in Augusta, Georgia. So we have all this talent and we've had all these opportunities. So we've just established these networking meetings and we bring in speakers from out of town. And the speakers that we have coming into town are names that people in the industry recognize, like Richard Baitlick, Ed Scotus, John Strand, and names like that. But people who not in the industry just know these are the people that are asked to come and testify before Congress and do contract work for Department of Homeland Security and other intelligence organizations when it comes to, hey, we want to know if somebody could really break this VMware application, or some of the leaked videos that have come out from generators hopping around and bursting into flames. That was the guys we have come speaking in Augusta, Georgia at our regular meetings that we have. November 7th coming up, just to plug the next meeting. November 7th, we got Tony Sager, who is former director at NSA and is now the head or one of the technical directors for the Center for Internet Security, who defines all of our standards, and is also the director of SANS Innovation Center, which does all of SANS classified training for intelligence agencies, is going to be here November 7th to speak to the community about how to secure these environments that we have to live in now. I'm just here because I am super excited about where we've come from. Just 10 years ago, to having to struggle to find 15 people, to now our quarterly meetings, we always have 80 to 100 people showing up at our quarterly meetings here with great speakers and great events. And really, I see the role of our organization and the challenge of our organization moving forward is to provide those networking opportunities and venues to build that ecosystem that'll draw in the community, provide them with opportunities to interact with each other and to tackle some of these interesting, challenging problems. And I think that Fort Gordon is really going to make that problem, a lot more fun to address and give us a lot of resources that's going to help in that environment.
And I'll say that it's interesting when we talk about what we already have here, the ranking of Augusta being second in the nation for growth in jobs in the technology sector was actually made, I believe, before it was announced that Cyber Command is going in. So it's amazing what we do have going on here. But I will segue nicely to Tom Patterson.
Thank you, Deke. I, too, want to take a second and thank the GRU leadership for inviting me to participate in this, and Deke for putting together this panel specifically. I think this could be one of the more useful panels of the 2-day session here. I'm a lifelong security guy. I worked for one of those IC groups that was not represented on the stage last night or today, but was the best. And still there's a lot of competition among the IC groups, intelligence community groups, despite messaging otherwise. Everybody wants to be the top one. This career in security has taken me through a lot. Security, when I started, was a means to stay alive. I was generally put in harm's way in bad parts of the world and just relied on security to keep me alive. And since I didn't die, I figured I must have learned something. I then parlayed that into electronic commerce. I ran electronic commerce for IBM and then went off to run security for Deloitte. Got to travel the world, still travel the world. And then I found Augusta. The night before the ice storm. Bought my first house, closed on my first house the night before the ice storm. It was a Saturday. I closed on the house. Monday, I was going to get insurance. Trees, I think we lost like 9 trees, including one right through the roof. It was welcome to Augusta, and yet, the people that I met here, and both professionally and personally, have really gotten me very excited about helping Augusta get to that next level. It really should be. It has all the components. We have all the components needed to become the cyber center for the United States. And that's a really important thing, both for Augusta, but also for the United States and for the rest of the free world. There isn't a particular center. There's lots of these summits that go on in cities all over the world. Every city, right now I Googled Cyber Summit to find out the address of this meeting today and came up with 3 or 4 others in different cities of the world that are having cyber summits today. There's nothing unique about grabbing onto cyber. It was like grabbing onto Y2K in 1999. Hey, there's a big moneymaker. Let's go do that. Let's hang out our shingle and be Y2K experts. But there is something about Augusta and cyber that is unique. All the things you heard today about what's coming down from Cyber Command, what's already here at Fort Gordon with Signals Command, what's already here with the NSA, these are really, really valuable tools that Augusta has. And they're either going to make use of them and become the cyber center, or they're going to squander them. And so I'm voting not only personally by moving here, moving my family here, getting involved before all the Cyber Command people get down here in a couple years, but really get integrated in. I'm working with nonprofits. If you know Hack Augusta, the clubhouse, they run the clubhouse here in town. They put on TEDx Augusta. They do a lot of good nonprofit work to try and seed the organizations here, working with GRU to help build up advanced programs there to help their students graduate and get more important jobs, not just basic security jobs, but more important security jobs coming out of there. So personally, I'm very involved in the community already and working with the great local teams that I've met here. Scott, I see out there. Deke is here. Joni is here. I mean, there's really great people in this town that all represent different groups. And one of the things we're advocating here on this panel is that we've got to come together as one group and really make that happen. I mentioned that's all personal. I also have a day job, which is I run the security business for Unisys. So that means I'm responsible for the security of Unisys worldwide, but also for the security of all of Unisys's clients worldwide. And that's a job that I took on at the beginning of this year. And once I saw that we had leased out the Port Discovery. Anyway, the cool building, pink building downtown on the river. I immediately said, okay, well, this is where cyber is going to live for Unisys as well. And already started to build out relationships with Fort Gordon and some of the commands down here because of this great pool of energy that's here. So we've got personal stake in this. I've got a professional stake in that Unisys is committed to bring 700 new jobs into downtown Augusta over the next couple of years. We've already got the first couple hundred in place downtown, buying lunches on Broad Street and hopefully staying after work and going to some of those great restaurants. The next step is really getting the community, the CSRA community as a whole, to put aside their political boundaries and start working together. And that's what I want to see personally, that's what I want to see professionally, and that's what I'm committed to help with on both levels. So that's why I really wanted to be on this panel, Deke, and I appreciate you invite me down. We've got a lot to say. Let's open it up and start the questioning.
I agree. If you guys, do we have any index cards out there?
Do they all know what our topic is, Deke?
But I will just go off of something that Tom said. It truly is all about the collaboration. And during my time in office, I would always share with people, there's no us and them, it's all us. And we need to look at it that way. We're really focused with this panel on trying to erase the lines. I used to say tear down the walls, but erase the line sounds a little bit nicer. How do you traverse the generation gap when it comes to cyber issues? Sure.
If I could, I have to say that there are 3 key elements that we found in our experience in the greater Fort Meade, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. And it was this commitment to partnership, industry, government, education, as I had said before, you have that. The industry component is really important because you always have to be mindful of what of sustaining and enhancing the mission, but what's the customer ultimately, what their needs are, and from the talent perspective, that's where the real generational component comes in that we've seen. We still have 10, 15,000 jobs that are open in the greater Baltimore, Washington area and in the area of cybersecurity. We're doing a tremendous job of filling the pipeline, university support of the mission and industry there, but there's still this tremendous need for jobs. So it's like, how do you set yourself apart? How do you create an ecosystem that not only recruits, but as the general said earlier, actually retains? And it's a tricky issue. I mean, it's where the proximity of the contractors and industry to support the mission, the proximity of the university to those industry partners and ultimately to the mission. That's really important too. But you'd be interested to know by 2020, half of this nation's workforce will be of millennial age. That's 18 to 34 years old. How they share information, how they go about their daily work. They're the most culturally diverse, educated demographic and largest demographic in our nation's history. How they do things really is kind of outside the norm of what we may be used to in our everyday lives. So incorporating that as part of your plan, I always like to say it's good to have a plan, but plan to be flexible at the same time. You can think you've thought out all the necessary components. You know, you got the infrastructure, you got the environment that you've built like near the installation, but then the talent quotient comes into mind. And these young professionals, these young entrepreneurs, many of which in our area, some of the hottest companies are coming right out of government or the military. These young people like pursuing commercially relevant technologies that they've developed in their time working for the government. They love these urban environments. They love these opportunities to collaborate with one another in very close proximity. They love dining out. They don't like cars. That's not where they want to put their money. It's dining out, going out, listening to music, and again, finding opportunities to collaborate with their friends. So that generational component, how they're sharing information, how they like to collaborate with one another, it's an important consideration that we found in our experience back home.
And
Go ahead.
The community really needs to deliver that to the workforce, to the millennial workforce that's coming in here. You know, as Tom says, that's going on around Baltimore and Fort Meade in a deliberate way,
right,
if you would. We've got the beginnings. We've got pieces of that. GRU does things on Cyber Saturdays. The Clubhouse does a lot of things with younger kids and teaching them how to build robots and drones and that sort of a thing. But having more of a collective group together that comes together to say, okay, the workforce is starting to come here. What are we going to do to keep them here? What are we going to do to interest them here, to let them develop here? And I thought it was interesting to hear the deputy director at CIA, and the Langley campus is one of the most secure places in the world. And to prove it, all you have to do is drive by and your cell phone stops working. So you know that they're really important. They care about signals intelligence, and yet they're saying they're going to open up Wi-Fi for the campus because that's what the next generation needs. They need to be able to spin up VMs in the cloud and just go get something done. The great thing is, you can, if you think about it, you can actually plan for that and deliver that. And this is an opportunity that as a community, as a CSRA community, we have to work together as opposed to not sharing those or maybe competing for those same people. Work together to provide those kinds of services. And I think that next generation of millennials will absolutely flock to it. And I think we'll be surprised at what they create.
Please, sir.
Because I think the question had to do with bridging the generations and bridging the culture. And so, first of all, unless I've missed something when I came on the campus, I don't think there's an age limit to education. And so if there's an older generation that doesn't know the technologies, don't stop learning. And so that's the first challenge I'll have, I'll throw out there. The second is, don't confuse being comfortable with the technology with understanding how the technology works. And so if you bought an automobile when automobiles were first being made, you had to understand how they worked because they broke down quite often, and as an owner, you had to fix it. Now my wife thinks nothing of walking up to the car, putting her hand next to it, it unlocks, she opens the door, she steps on the brake pedal, pushes a button, it starts up, puts it in gear, pushes the gas pedal, pushes the brake, and it would probably scare her to death if I told her when you step on the brake, there's actually no linkage from that brake pedal to the actual brakes. She's very comfortable with the technology, but she doesn't understand it. And so we have a generation as well that's very comfortable with the technology that doesn't necessarily understand it. And so don't become apprehensive of the technology because of that. And the final thing I'll leave you with is we need different thinkers. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what to use her own term, the P. Didney, you need people that think differently, because what happens in this space and why we have problems defending it is because people are thinking of how to make the software and the systems do what they were not intended to do to begin with. And so we need disruptive thinkers, and sometimes just because you're a generation off, you're disrupting the thoughts within that generation. And that's a good thing in this battle space, in this space, because it helps us to realize the things that we didn't think to think of.
Martin?
Well, one of the things I do is I try to reach out to the old folks as a younger guy. No. Yeah, I don't necessarily, I know that we've got a hiring gap, right? That I don't necessarily see a generational gap, though. I mean, I think that there's some things that we have to do to provide opportunities to people so that they have opportunities to learn. I think we've got an education and training problem where we need to teach some very fundamental IT skills and then security skills to an entire generation of people. Well, actually, probably a couple of generations of people, from the young to middle age to, you know what, I'm senior in my career, but you know what, I probably still need to know how this technology works. So there may be generation gaps, but I'm less focused on that and more focused on delivering the ability for people to learn and the correct environments to encourage people to get excited about this stuff and to want to go and learn this information to, you know, just everyone from my 19-year-old son who's presented at security conferences in Las Vegas to, you know, my mom and dad who, you know, still don't quite understand their iPhone, but they can get a little excited when I can show them some really cool things that they can do with this stuff that's kind of security related. So
I'll interject or put a little input here too. I'm currently working with an urban design team. We've put in proposals in cities across the U.S., but in every city, whether it's Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Columbia, South Carolina, they have problems engaging with their millennials. They say we have public meetings and it's all people, you know, 50 and older. So how can we get those young kids to these meetings? And one of the things to me is that generation, we need to engage them where they are, whether it's on the internet or several years ago, I spoke at a Theology on Tap event. So it had packed with 20 and 30 somethings. I was telling somebody I'll never be able to run for office again because I was drinking wine on camera with a bunch of millennials, but it worked and they were there. So there are ways to engage, but we really need that outreach to them. I used to share with people while I was mayor that I was not building a city for my generation and generations that came before. I was focused on trying to build a city where you could recruit and retain the best and the brightest young minds.
I think it's wise, if I could just interject. I mean, we've started to utilize young teachers, young technologists, and they're offering after-school coding programs. They're developing maker spaces in old rec centers in Baltimore, and they're bringing kids in on the weekends. So you find that way to make that connection with some of these millennials, some of these entrepreneurial thinkers, and they really want to give back and get involved. So we've had a lot of success in engaging them in the educational process to try to fill some of those gaps, and as part of some of these Teach the Teachers initiatives.
Absolutely.
They've been huge resources.
Okay, our next question, and I don't know that we'll be able to get to all of them, but what can a rural school far from Fort Gordon do to build a smaller cyber ecosystem or educational opportunities without significant industry nearby? Tom?
Well, the good news is this is the cyber generation we're talking about. You don't need to be physically coming to a steel mill to go get a steel mill job. You can do cyber from a laptop and a connection. And pretty much everywhere through rural America, we have high-speed internet, and devices cost as low as $100 now to get online. So cost really isn't a problem. What could happen better I think, is having regional programs that anybody can plug into, whether they're in a remote rural school or a remote just a person in a house, or they're right downtown. But they can all work on the same programs, get together periodically. But because we're talking about cyber business, there's great programs to be had here. And again, one of the things that strikes me is the things that Tom was talking about, that, we tried this, we tried that, and Todd mentioned a few. There's the MakerBot here, and there's this. I've seen, just in my brief time here, those things exist here.
Right.
But it's one group doing a small thing somewhere. And I guess my plea here is, and I'm offering to help, but what can we do as a community, as a CSRA, to say, okay, this group does this thing really well. How can we share that with the rural school? How can we share that with everybody in the community? If we focus some energy on that, rather than let's see who can figure out how to do a maker fair. Well, we already have people that know how to do that. Let's figure out how we can invest in that and draw people to that and advertise that and push it out into the sticks. I mean, all of that can happen together if we focus on that.
Absolutely. Mark?
I'd say the most important thing you can do is something, right? I've been in the security industry for many years, and I know absolutely nothing about security, okay? Well, I probably know a lot of things, but when it comes to the vast scope of everything that there is in information security, I know such a small amount. And I think that people are sometimes intimidated by what it takes to be an expert in this field, and don't necessarily feel like they're ready to reach out to people and begin training people. If you're a teacher in a rural school, there are free resources online that will teach you the basics of information security. There's cyberaces.org is a website that has free online training with free quizzes and free curriculums that you can go and download and deliver to students, and just go through that program yourself so that you know and understand that material. And it's basic stuff. It's, before you can become a security expert, you have to have some basic understanding of cyber IT technology. You have to understand networking and operating systems, and hey, a little bit of programming would do you wonders. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Fortran, but yeah, code.org, Code Academy. There's lots of great free resources out there. Go and learn some of that and begin teaching them something. Today most schools have nothing in terms of learning to code, learning to do computers, and anything you do is going to be better than, nothing.
Right.
So.
Todd?
So that's one of the things, the endeavors for within Georgia, that the Alliance for Cybersecurity Education has. We have a website, and we want to continue doing those type things. It calls for partners where partners are. And so here there is a great ability to bring in industry partners as mentors, internship programs, some of those other things. But as you put that content and make that content available, what we did not do is create curriculum for Columbia County or Richmond County or just the CSRA. We made it available for the Georgia Board of Education. And so now that that's approved, and now it's a collaboration between teachers and their abilities. And in some cases, we found individuals that have an aptitude and ability but did not have necessarily the skills. Well, if you have an aptitude and ability and a desire, you can learn the skills. The skills is probably one of the least things. I'll tell you, as we look at recruiting in the Army, what we found is that we were checking to find out what people knew, now not what people had the ability to learn. And so it's an untapped capability if you find out that folks have an ability, not so much testing on what they currently know. And so don't underestimate that the next Einstein of computer security can be in some very remote area, and if only given the opportunity. And as has already been mentioned, this is all about the network, all about virtualization. And so what's available out there, it's really engendering a desire. And I think that's one of the things that concerns me, is that's probably the biggest generational gap in some things in generation, is a desire. It scares me when you go into a local community college today, or even a large college today, And most individuals in a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics course have a passport that allowed them to come here to learn. And as soon as they learn, they leave. I don't mind people coming here and learning from other countries, but when 80, 90%, one of our battalion commanders for the 782nd, Dave Chang, in his PhD program, he was the only American in his PhD course. Wow. He was the only one that did not have a passport that brought him here and was leaving. And so that concerns me. Why are we not inspired? Is it because of lack of opportunity? And that probably goes to the question. We need to open up the floodgates because there's individuals, or are we not inspiring? And if we're not, woe is unto us, because I've said this before, we became a great nation because of our ability to be able to critically think and manufacture. In fact, we manufactured our way out of a Great Depression. And we were consumers, and so every individual is a consumer. We've outsourced a lot of our manufacturing. That's not a way out of the next depression. We've already outsourced that out. And my fear is when you look in colleges and universities today, we may be outsourcing our creativity as well. And no nation that I know has ever existed because they were strictly consumers. So we've got to reach all those little pockets of excellence as much as we can.
Deke, if I could interject, because Todd makes an excellent point. I mean, I love your quote, call for partners where the partners are. I was going to interject and say, we really had to go back and redefine what we deemed to be our sense of community. Nobody owns cyber, not one organization, not one company, or community, even geographically. We found a lot of different models in which to follow, going to Austin, Texas, and realized the importance of celebrating your success and identifying your rock stars and celebrating them and getting them connected with the other emerging leaders. But this instance of inspiration, it's an important issue, particularly when we look at the numbers of jobs that are open. And what we found was that we had to go deeper into the schools and help connect the dots. I mean, you're already doing this with a lot of your curriculum and your teach-the-teacher programs, but inspiring in kids that idea that this path from A to B exists and this is what it looks like. One of our good friends really became a champion for the cyber industry and did a great job of helping all of us kind of work together to develop deep relationships. He started a company called Life Journey. And it's a company that literally helps establish mentors, virtual mentors for students in middle schools, whether they're at Exelon Corporation or T. Rowe Price, or whether they're with the Ravens, trying to spark that interest and that inspiration in a kid's mind and give them a direct pathway to what it was going to take to get them to that position. And I think you have a great opportunity here with the installation, with now industry building up, companies like Unisys, to start to do those kinds of things and connect the dots for kids.
Great. I actually have a question myself that just came to my mind. Tom, we discussed how, the community does support cyber and the growth at Fort Gordon, but to a large degree, it's a buzzword, and I'm not sure how many people really fully understand it. So there are, pressures that come along with the growth. I'm sure you've seen those in Maryland, but what can we all do, and this is to all the panelists, to get the community more educated and engaged across the board?
The beauty of this thing called cyber, I mean, one is it's so hard to define. And I know that doesn't sound like a beauty, it sounds more like a challenge, but it cuts across all the industry silos. And we spent a lot of time trying to build up to support the mission at Meade and the other installations throughout, and we were focused .gov, .mil, and a lot of people started to think, well, we're just talking about, government, military, security, that kind of thing. It's like, well, no. I mean, we've had to broaden our sense of community and the numbers of people that we had around the table engaged in the conversation. Finance, energy, healthcare. We're trying to position ourselves as a growing health IT market where we want to dominate. But we're bringing in partners to help Hopkins kind of figure out their culture, people from Stanford and UT Austin. But it's an excellent question. I mean, I think you just have to, again, this sense of broadening your community, going out to other markets and sharing best practices. A lot of times when you take a team of folks out to another market, you come back feeling a heck of a lot better about the place you call home, thinking, oh, we actually do have it pretty well figured out. And maybe you'll pick up a few tips from another marketplace. But it is really about that commitment to collaboration and communication, doing it on a routine basis and getting together, having your cyber challenges, having kids involved, and sharing like what's working at such and such school or what's working in certain communities. Listening to the employer saying, yeah, I could get 150 more people here if only this, and helping share the load and solving everybody else's problems or their challenges. So I think that's really important.
Todd?
So in the military, we would call this a ways, ends, and means. And unfortunately, what we tend to do is we all want to focus on ways. What can I do? And when you do that, oftentimes you end up competing for the same means, the resources to get there. And if we're not careful, we end up in a hiring war, and we wonder why it costs so much to do certain things. Well, we've depleted everything that way. I think all of that comes together if you focus on the ends. You've got to create a vision. You've got to know where you're going. I'm just a simple kind of guy, but when I get in my car and fill out my GPS, it wants to know, where do I want to go and where am I starting? And if I don't put both of those in there, I'm not going to get to my destination. I'm going to get somewhere. I'm going to get to my destination. It's just not going to be where I wanted to get. And so really sitting down as companies, as communities of interest, as the community itself, and saying, where do we see ourselves in 10 years? And then start vision casting so that everyone gets that. And as that vision, and you've got a vision when somebody else from a different area comes up and says, hey, I heard that you're going to, and that was a vision that we were casting, and now it's going out and it's been understood and interpreted back to me. Yes, that's what we're trying to get at. And so until we have a vision as a community, we're never going to get there. And we're going to continue to battle over the resources of land, the resources of where the taxes are going to go. Do I wait till I get people in before I build the infrastructure? Well, now no one's coming because the folks that did come tell you how long it takes to get to work, and you don't want to do that. And so you've got to have a vision, because that breaks down all of those things. It then allows you to prioritize your means, and it takes a bunch of ways off the table where you don't waste time.
Exactly. I think it's, that once again, know us and them, and people can't be, take ownership of the plan. I want it to be my plan. It has to be our plan. Mark?
Yeah, so the question that I think has haunted security people forever is, how do we make people care about cybersecurity? I had a really awesome quote from a coworker of mine, Courtney Imbert, and she said the security people are a lot like Cassandra from Greek mythology, and she was a prophetess who refused to sleep with the god of war, I forget whoever that was, and her curse for such an offense was that she was cursed to speak the truth and have no one believe her. And that's really where we are as security professionals. Is we've been saying, hey, this is a problem. We need to fix this for years, but people don't seem to grasp onto that or seem to care. And it's baffling to us as professionals, is why don't people care? And I think we have to relate it to them in terms that they understand. You do that through analogies and stories and things like that. I think that, when you're talking to just a mom and a dad, we can teach them about how to protect their kids online. We can offer courses that address their immediate concerns. When it comes to people who are in professional positions, we can teach them about these new emerging skills that you can use to solidify your career. But yeah, if there was a magic button for making people care about security, I would have pushed that a long time ago.
But it's interesting too, and you and I have had the discussion that when the ranking of us being second in the nation in growth in the technology sector came out, I had people that refused to believe me. And they said, I just don't see it. And I said, well, these are not your typical companies. They're not really advertising much or anything, but now we bring in Unisys. So, Tom?
Well, I have a slightly different take on the question, Deke. There's a group, I've had a clearance since I was 17 years old. And despite now that the OPM breach, my adversaries know all about me, that's given me a really unique view of what the threat picture really is. So I would say I'm in that 1% of people that are well versed on what the threat is. That doesn't translate well. You can't say I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. That's not what we're talking about anymore. what I advocate and what's worked in other places, Venice, California, Venice Beach, California, not a typical comparison point for Augusta, Georgia, but I see a lot of similarities. 5 years ago, houses were dirt cheap in Venice. It was on the water, it was beautiful, but there was no sense of community. There's no real, what was it? What were the jobs? What did they know? And then the internet moved in. So they renamed it Silicon Beach. They had a couple of personalities, like Maryland has this guy, Rick Gertz, that did the life journey thing that Tom was talking about. They have a couple of personalities there in Venice Beach, and they said, look, this is Silicon Beach. This is what we're going to go do. And most of what they did tied to what Venice was known for, which is they're in the shadow of Hollywood. So they knew entertainment really well. So Silicon Beach brought many of the companies that are the leading companies in the world at bringing entertainment to the internet. That's how they made themselves. And now they're the leading Bitcoin and alternative payments space. Now they're the leading virtual reality space. There's a bunch of other things. Tinder came from there, if any of you are single. But all these things popped up out of that once they hooked up with what they were naturally good at. I look around Augusta, a lot of the people I meet here are somehow attached to healthcare. There's these great teaching universities for healthcare, one we're sitting in today. But there's a lot of people. I go to the coffee shops, and there are health students, doctors and nursing students sitting there doing their homework. There's a lot of people that care about healthcare. So one opportunity is for us collectively, again, as Deke's been talking about, as a collective region, get together, and we do the hard work of relating cyber to what Augusta already knows and where we can connect with a lot of people. Get it going with that. You heard Towson State or University of Towson University is now trying to get to that space because they've got Hopkins in their backyard. Well, we've got a whole lot of healthcare down here in Augusta. We know the Army. We know Signals Command. We know a lot of that, so we can leverage it in that space. There's a couple of natural places that Augusta can start to bring that message out in ways that aren't fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that are enablement and jobs and growth and betterment. And that's, I think, a great message to be emanating from Cyber Augusta.
It is definitely an exciting time for the city. We'll take one more question. It is exciting to realize the wonderful potential of being center for cyber at Fort Gordon, Augusta, and the surrounding area. However, do we now become vulnerable to not only cyber attacks, but physical attack? Tom?
Well, A, you already were. B, physical attacks are not generally how most people plan against a cyber attack. So it's not like anyone expects more bombs to be dropping out of the sky because signals are emanating from here, because they probably aren't anyway, just the brains behind it. So no, I don't think you are. But in general, the world we live in, everyone is more vulnerable. Every sector. I focus on something called critical infrastructure protection. That means there's 18 sectors that make up the critical infrastructure of the country. And if any one of them were to fall, it could have a devastating cascading effect on the entire nation, the entire economy. And so we want the companies that make up those sectors, the companies that employ most of the people in Augusta, just the average everyday agriculture, banking, power, communications, all those basic jobs, they now are under more attack and do need to take security more seriously. It's just the day that they live in. I say it's an advantage to be here where you're surrounded by the best and the brightest that can help support the security of Augusta.
Mark?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. SRS has been here forever, right? They're certainly a target. NSA has been here forever. It's certainly a target. I would say the fact that we now have so many resources and so many people in the area who are versed on the threat and how to respond to this, and are talking with people who provide local utilities and things like that at these meetings and events like this, is a significant advantage to us that we did not have 5-6 years ago.
Todd?
All right, so the pastor's going to come out on me. So fear is fiction evaluated as reality. It hasn't happened yet, so it's fiction. and we start worrying about what if this will happen, what if the bad thing will happen. Well, just what if the next cyber 9/11 is prevented because of what is happening here at Fort Gordon? So let's think about all the great things that can happen, and let's move out in that direction.
Tom?
Not a pastor, but I think I have a pretty good quote that'll help kind of tie it up. You're the center of every problem and every solution to every problem that you may face. And we have kind of taken a similar approach up in the Baltimore area, where my alma mater, UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, really forged ahead to really develop industry partnerships and a close working relationship with the NSA. President there is very proud of the fact that the NSA has just hired about its 1,000th UMBC grad in the last couple of weeks. So they are a steady, they provide a steady diet of well-skilled talent to NSA. They know that comes with certain risk, but they assume the responsibility. And now they house over 55 new cyber companies now there on site, and they are being asked by the state of Maryland, UMBC is, to help them address their own cybersecurity challenges. So embrace it. I mean, it's here. I mean, that comes with the tremendous opportunity and the responsibility that you have with the growth of the Army Cyber Command here. And I think this community, again, everything that I've heard, this community is up to that challenge and will help solve problems that will be utilized, throughout the world.
Thank you. Well, gentlemen, I want to personally thank you for being a part of this panel today. To everybody out there in the audience, thank you so much for coming. I hope it's been informative. And that ends our discussion. Thank you so much.
Very good, Todd. Very good. Yeah.